All right, Algebra 2, Lesson 3.0, Factoring Trinomial Quadratics, okay? So first let's talk about what factoring is before I show you how to do it, so you understand the concept behind factoring. So take, for example, the number 12. If I factor the number 12, what I'm doing is I'm finding some terms that will multiply to give me 12. For example, 4 times 3 would work, right? 4 times 3 will give me 12. So what that means is 4 and 3, all right, are the factors of 12. If I multiply the 4 and 3, it will give me the 12. Okay, so 4 and 3 are factors of 12. Now let's apply this idea to trinomials. X squared minus x minus 12. So what you guys are going to learn how to do is find factors that if I multiply, right, if you multiply, it will give you the x squared minus x minus 12, right? So I already know the answer is x minus 4, x plus 3. So if I multiply x minus 4 times x plus 3, if I work all this out, it will give me x squared minus x minus 12, okay? So what that means is x minus 4 and x plus 3 are factors of x squared minus x minus 12. Okay, so that's like the idea of factoring. So that's what we're going to learn how to do today. Okay. Now the first step in factoring, and the most important, is you always need to look for a GCF, a greatest common factor. Okay. So anytime you need to factor in math, you always look for a GCF first. That is the first step. Okay. If there is a GCF, you must take it out. Okay, you want to take it out. So example 1 here, all right, so we need to factor this. So the first step is, okay, let's look for a GCF. Now, the way you take out the GCF or look for one is you're thinking, all right, now we're just focusing on the numbers right now, so ignore the variables. So the 2 and the 18, what's the biggest number you can think of other than 1 that would divide both of these evenly, okay? Well, I know I could divide both 2 and 18 evenly by 2, so the GCF is 2. So if I take out 2, which is the GCF, 2 times what will give me 2x squared? That would be x squared. 2 times what will give me positive 18? That would be positive 9. Okay? Now, if you want to know if you did it correctly, if you distribute the 2, it should give you what you started with. Okay? Let's try another one. Number 2. So 6, negative 21, and negative 15. So what's the biggest number other than 1 that will divide all of these evenly? Okay, so it looks like I can divide all of them evenly by 3. So 3 is my GCF. So if I take 3 out from all of these, so 3 times what would give me 6x squared? That would be 2x squared. 3 times what gives me negative 21x? That would be negative 7x. 3 times what would give me negative 15? That would be positive 5. Okay, now you might be wondering, well, what about the variables? What about the letters? You notice the first term has x squared, so it has 2 x's. The middle one has 1x, just x. And the 15 doesn't have an x at all. So they don't all have an x. So there's no x in common, right? If you want to take out an x, all right, as your GCF, all the terms need to have an x, okay? So number 2 and number 1, right, all the terms don't have an x. So you notice our GCF, right, did not have an x. You cannot take out an x from all of them, so the GCF does not have an x, okay? Now, example 3, here's an example where the GCF will have an x. First of all, let's focus on the numbers. So 6, negative 12, and 30, what's the biggest number that will divide all of them evenly? So you want to find the biggest, right? That's why it's called the greatest common factor. The biggest number I can think of is 6. It divides all of them evenly. Now you notice the first term has 3 x's, the second has 2 x's, and the last one has 1 x. So they all have at least 1 x, right, in common. So your GCF will be 6x because you could take out an x from all of them, okay? So we're going to end up with 6x times what gives you 6x to the third? Well, that would be x squared. 6x times what gives you negative 12x squared? That would be negative 2x. And 6x times what gives you negative 30x? That'd be positive, negative. It'd be negative 5. Okay, so if you distribute the 6x, you should get what you started with. Okay. Number 4, okay. Now let's take a look at the numbers first. So we have 2, 1, and 6, right? So when the biggest number that would divide all of them evenly is 1, that means that there's no GCF, right? And then if you take a look at the variables, right, the first term has x to the third, the second has x squared, and the last one doesn't even have an x. So they don't have x in common. So number 4 is an example where there is no GCF. Okay, so whenever there's no GCF, you would just move to the next step of factoring. Okay. All right, some steps to factoring. So here are some general steps to factoring. So the first thing we always do is we always take out a GCF if there is one. The second step, we make sure A is positive. If it's not, we factor out a negative value to make it positive. 3 is we'll factor it using the X method. And 4, we multiply your answers to verify. So if you want to check if your answers are correct, you can multiply them to make sure that you did it correctly. Okay. Now I factored using the X method. There's lots of different ways to factor. Okay. So I factored using the X method. I feel it's the easiest way for students to understand it. Right? But keep in mind, there are many methods, and if your previous teacher might have taught you a different method, as long as you know how to factor correctly, you can use that way. That's perfectly fine. All right, so I'm going to factor number 5 here. So first of all, we're going to identify the A, B, and C values. So remember, A is the number in front of x squared. B is the number in front of the x. And C, right, is the very last term. Right? Usually it doesn't have an x. Okay. So the first step, we take out a GCF if there is one. So does number 5 have a GCF? So if I look at the numbers, it's 1, -2, and -24. There's no number that divides all of them evenly except for 1, right? And they don't all have an x, so you can't take out an x. So there's no GCF for number 5. So then we move to the next step, right? Is A positive? Yep, A is positive, okay? So we move to the third step, which is we factor using the x, okay? So I'll show you how to factor using the x. It's rather easy. So first make an x, and then we're going to take A and multiply it with C. So A times C is -24. Okay, be really careful with the signs. Okay, when you're doing the X method, the signs are very important. The B value, what's B? B is -2. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to find two numbers that multiply to give you -24, but if you add them, it'll give you -2. Okay, so for example, -6 and 4. If I multiply -6 and 4, I get -24. But if I add them, it'll give me the -2. So I know that I've found the two correct numbers. After you've found the two correct numbers, you're going to divide them by whatever A is. A is 1 in this case. Okay. Now, you want to reduce these fractions if you can. In this case, there's nothing to reduce. Okay. So what's going to happen is this -6/1, you're going to use these numbers, right, to find your factors. So we're working with the variable x, right? So you could think of, we're working with x. So this means that x minus 6, and from here, x plus 4, these are your factors. Okay, so we're using these fractions, right, to get our factors. So the denominator of the fraction, right, that whatever number is in the denominator, that's the number that goes in front of x, right? So in front of x here is the 1, right? I'm just not writing it earlier. And then the -6, whatever number is on top, just follows. And these are our factors. And if you want to know if this is correct, you can multiply everything out, you can FOIL it, and it should give you what you started with. Okay? Let's try number 6. So we're going to go through the steps. Step 1. So just follow these 4 steps right here, right? Is there a GCF? 6, 7, and 2, it doesn't look like there's any number except for 1 that divides all of them. So there's no GCF. All right, A is positive, so now I'm going to do the x. A times C is going to be 12. B is 7. So what numbers multiply to give me 12? but add to give me 7. 4 times 3. And then once I find the numbers, I divide by whatever a is. A is 6. Now for this example, we can reduce the fractions, right? 3 over 6 reduces to 1/2. 4 over 6 reduces to 2 over 3, right? So we're just reducing these right here to get these fractions. So remember, the denominator is the number that goes in front of x. So since the denominator, since this is 3, it's going to be 3x, and then the 2 at the top just follows, plus 2. Over here, the denominator is 2, so we have 2x, and then the top number just follows, plus 1. And these are your factors. Okay? And if you want to check if it's right, like I said, you can multiply everything. It should give you what you started with. All right, so we're just going to do a lot more examples just so you guys get the feel for it. So in example 7 here, so first we look for a GCF, right? So we have a -1, -13, and +48. Now there's no number that divides all of them evenly except for 1. But I notice since a is negative, I want a to be positive. So what I'm going to do is, whenever your a is negative, you're always going to factor out at least a -1, if not some other value. Okay? So I'm going to take out a -1 to make the a positive, because then now a will be positive. Remember, it changes the signs of everything. Plus 13x minus 48. All right? So you have to make sure a is positive before you do the x. That's very important. Next thing, I'm going to do the x, right? A times c, remember this is b, so a times c, -48, b is 13. So what two numbers multiply to give me -48, but they add to give me 13? That's going to be 16 and -3. After you find the numbers, you divide by a. Now a is +1 now, right? Because remember we took out the negative, so a is +1. So remember, the denominator goes in front of the x. Okay. So remember, we took out the -1. It's got to be part of our answer. So then we're going to end up with x plus 16 and x minus 3. Okay. So don't forget your GCF. Make sure it's part of your answer. I see students forget it a lot. Okay. Number 8 here. All right. What's my GCF? It looks like I can take out a 2. Okay. So if I take out a 2, I'm going to end up with x squared minus 13x plus 40. Then if I make my x, a times c is going to be +40, and b is -13. So what's going to be my two numbers? It looks like -8 and -5 works. If I multiply both of these, I get +40. If I add them up, I get -13. Okay. Now after I find the numbers, I have to divide by whatever a is. A is 1. So my answer, so bring down your GCF. The denominator is 1, so it's just going to be x minus 8. The other denominator is also 1, so it's just going to be x minus 5. Okay. Number 9, let's look for a GCF here. 16, -14, and 3. It doesn't look like there's a GCF here. Okay, so there's no GCF. So a is positive. I could go ahead and start doing the x. A times c. That's going to give me 48. What's my b? B is -14. Okay. Now, what two numbers multiply to give me 48, but they'll add up to give me -14? So it looks like -8, -6. If I multiply, I get +48. If I add, I get -14. All right, so I found my two numbers. Now I need to divide by whatever a is, which is 16. Now I need to reduce these fractions. So this -8 over 16 reduces to -1 over 2. This -6 over 16 reduces to negative, so divide top and bottom by 2. So it looks like I'm going to end up with 3 over 8, right? So you want to reduce the fractions as much as you can. Now the denominator is 2, so that means that my factor is 2x minus 1. The denominator is 8, so that means my factor is 8x minus 3. Okay. Number 11 here. So I'm looking for a GCF, 18, 3, and 3. So it looks like I can divide all of them by 3 And then I also notice a is negative. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out a negative 3 instead, because then that'll make my a positive. So I'll end up with 6x squared plus x minus 1. Okay, so be real careful about the signs. Make sure you change your signs when you take out a negative GCF. Okay, now I'm going to do the x. A times c and b. A times c is negative 6. B is positive 1. So it looks like 3 and negative 2 would work. Divide by a, which is 6. So reduce your fractions. 1 over 2. This becomes negative 1 over 3. So my factors, right? Don't forget your GCF. My factors will be 2x plus 1 and 3x minus 1. Okay? All right, so let's take a look at number 12 here. So it looks like my GCF, let's see, I have an 8, a 20, and a negative 48. Looks like I could take out a 4. That'll give me 2x squared plus 5x minus 12. Now I'm going to start the x. A times c, that's negative 24. B is 5. So it looks like the two numbers are going to be positive 8 and a negative 3. Divide by a, which is 2. All right, the 8 over 2 reduces to 4 over 1. So it looks like my factors will be x plus 4 and 2x minus 3. Okay. Number 13, GCF. First of all, notice a is negative. So I'm going to take out some negative value. What's the biggest number that divides all of them? Let's say it'll be 2. So negative 2. I'm going to end up with a positive 3x squared. The sign will change. That'll be negative 17x and a negative 6. Let's do a times c. A times c gives me negative 18. I'm trying to get a negative 17. That's the b. So what are the two numbers? That'd be negative 18 and a positive 1. Divide by a, which is 3. So reduce the fraction. That reduces to negative 6 over 1. So my factors will be an x minus 6. And since 3 is in the denominator here, that'll be 3x plus 1. Okay. Let's try the last two. So GCF, looks like I can take out a positive 2. Get 4x squared minus 13x plus 3. A times c, that's going to give me 12. I'm trying to get a negative 13, that's the b. So it looks like negative 12 and negative 1 are my numbers. I divide by a, which is 4. I can reduce the negative 12 over 4. That reduces to negative 3 over 1. So my factors will be x minus 3, 4x minus 1. Number 15 here. All right, so first of all, I notice a is negative, so I'm going to take out some sort of negative GCF, right? What's the biggest number that divides all of them? It looks like it would be 2, so I'm going to take out a negative 2. I'm going to end up with a positive 8x squared, a positive 5x, and a negative 3. Okay, so remember, whenever you're taking out a negative GCF, make sure you change the signs. Okay. Now a times c, that's going to give me negative 24. The b is 5. So what are going to be my two numbers? It looks like it's going to be positive 8, negative 3, divide by a. If I divide by a, which is 8, so 8 over 8 is going to be 1 over 1, right? So now my factors will be x plus 1 and 8x to the minus 3.